Welcome to the Feng Shui Mastery Show with your host, Kathy Hargaden. Now, we have a special guest this evening here to talk about the art of alchemy, and her name is Katrina Petit. Good evening, Katrina.
Good evening, Kathy. Thank you for inviting me to your Feng Shui Mastery Show.
Well, thank you very much for coming along. Now, I know you're a very busy lady, and I believe you are a textile artist, and you're
Yes.
working on a very interesting project at the moment. But before we kick off with that, how about giving us a little bit of a definition of what is alchemy?
It's interesting thing to. There are actually two kind of definitions you could say. There is one way is that alchemy was practiced in the past, in the Middle Ages, to make gold out of base metals like lead, and they really believed people could do that. So that's quite a physical way, so to say, which later became it's the forerunner of what is now our current chemistry. So there are lots of practices, started by practicing alchemy. There is also a metaphysical side of alchemy, which I believe is more true than the physical side. And that is that it was believed that if you could find the right formula, you could create an eternal life. And basically it was the development of the human being into realizing its true nature.
Okay, that sounds very interesting. And where does that true nature deem to lie?
Sorry,
Where does that true nature lead people to when they were supposed to kind of have that transmutation, so to speak?
Yeah, it's the realization that what you truly are is basically the creator itself.
Okay, all right. So it's that's the metaphysical meaning of it.
Yeah.
In terms of everyday life, I mean, we use the word alchemy. It's not a common word, but I was just looking at it in terms of the metamorphosis of people's environments and how when they change those environments, they can change something within themselves.
That's right. Yeah.
How does that definition or relate to the work that you do in terms of textiles and art?
In terms of art, at the moment, I'm busy with an alchemy, specifically alchemy project, in which you use all kinds of different elements, like metal, um, uh, like more material, or you could say earthy stuff. You use the air of inspiration.
Right.
So all the different elements are always coming into play when you create art.
Yeah.
In the specific project, I'm actually doing some chemical experiments with the effects on metal and then mostly copper, which get tremendous beautiful colors, as you see on this first
Yeah.
slide.
Yeah.
When you
Yeah.
heat the top with a blowtorch or above a hob, it gets a riot of colors.
It's
And
absolutely beautiful.
yeah,
But is this not this project not associated with a dynasty of a house of a family from
that's right.
Holland? Yeah.
I was invited by the Hertfordshire Archives and Document Libraries, which is in Hertford, the county town, which holds all the official documents dating back to 1060 to do with inheritance and tax stuff, deeds, properties for all those years.
Yeah.
And they have several hundreds of documents of one
Right.
particular family, and this family is called the Witte Ronge family, and they were Protestants living in Belgium, and prosecuted because of the at the time the Netherlands, because it wasn't called Belgium then, the Netherlands were occupied by the Spanish Inquisition, and they were Catholic, so they didn't, the Protestants had to fled the country, and so they settled in London. The original family with 2 kids, and they had absolutely nothing. They had to leave everything behind, and they started a brewery and did very well, and then they bought this land. And built a house on it, which is called the Rothamsted Manor, which is in the place Harpenden, and the house is still there. The 3rd generation changed it, and to honor their Dutch roots, they made all the gables of the house all Dutch gables, and this family became quite well off. One of the members, the 3rd generation, Sir John Witteronge, he became a champion of the king, and there was another member in the family who became mayor of London. There's lots of stories to do with this particular family.
Yeah. Can you just say something about the house with it relating to feng shui? I mean, how you've been to the house? Is that right?
No, I haven't. You haven't? I haven't been to the house. No, the house is now it's an agriculture research station, because one of the members started that. The family has died out, but at the moment it's like a big research in anything to do with agriculture, and sometimes a bit controversial in the sense of that they're testing with GM crops. So the chemical, element comes quite into what it currently is. The things that they're trying out, but all those documents, I had a look at the old documents in the archives, and there was a set of documents on alchemy, astrology, and medicine dating back 1640, around that time.
Wow.
And because of my interest in alchemy and astrology, I'm having a lifelong interest in these subjects. I got quite excited and started looking in those documents. They were all handwritten, apart from some almanacs, and those documents were in different languages: French, Dutch, English, and Latin. And it is full with alchemical symbols, and I love the symbols.
Okay, right. Can you tell us a little bit more about how they would have used them then? Why were they so interested in that subject?
Well, at the time, in those days, any person who was a bit studious inclined, and a bit higher up in society, they liked studying all kinds of subjects and books, and I think alchemy and astrology were very common subjects to study for lots of people.
Right. That's fascinating.
I don't know how the person who wrote the documents. I mean, they were treatises on books of philosophers and alchemists, which I did a little bit of background research on, like Sir Francis Bacon. But I can't find what they actually really did, this family, with the alchemy. I think it was more like an interest to study as a hobby, rather than that they were actually, practicing alchemy.
Right. And what about your own artwork? Can we go on to a slide where you can maybe talk us through about how you've come to use your own alchemy in your own artwork? So we're just looking at this picture here. Can you just tell us a bit about why you designed this the way it is?
That has quite it's a bit like an heirloom. It's quite an autobiographical story. My dad, it's called East Meets West, and my dad was I'm Dutch, and my dad the Netherlands had as a colony Indonesia, and after the Second World War, the Japanese were still occupying Indonesia, and there were not enough Dutch soldiers or healthy men left after the Second World War to help the people in Indonesia. So they asked for volunteer soldiers. So my dad went over, and he wasn't really in fighting there. You know, he had more a good time there.
Yeah.
And he came back with trunks full of batiks and wood carving, Indonesian wood carvings and paintings. So when I grew up, and you know, when he married, and later my mum, we had all those Indonesian artifacts in our house.
Okay, that's can I just ask you there, how did that affect you, having those artifacts around you?
It evoked a desire of traveling and of wanting to see more of the world and other cultures.
Yeah. So yeah, that's interesting, because some of the stuff we do we're talking about in feng shui as well, is what you have around you has a direct link to how you live your life. And this, just hearing this story about the artifacts, you know, would give you a desire to see what lies beyond in the bigger world.
Yeah. So yeah, going back to this this particular artwork. So the sky and some of the fabrics, that they are rubbings of the wooden Indonesian boxes, which are on the side cupboard, which you can't see, but it's next to this wall hanging. There are all those, and also there is my mother's Indonesian sewing boxes on there. So I've used that. My dad was a fruit grower. He had a big orchard. So hence this is a bit like my interpretation of an apple tree. My mum used to do lots of restoring, you know, his clothes, darning his clothes and restoring his jeans. So that's why I used jeans in there.
That's fascinating. And can we just go on to this one? I found quite feng shui orientated in terms of its Eastern dragons facing each other.
I had a passion for dragons. I did a whole year that I did anything to do with dragons.
Right.
This is quite an early on picture. It's quite simple, where I dyed the fabric myself.
It's got an Eastern feeling about it though as well, and you've got this on your wall, haven't you?
I'm quite interested in things like the I Ching and you know, the Tao Te Ching.
Yes.
So hence this element of the dragons come in there. I practice Tai Chi, and this is a bit of a Chinese affinity to the philosophy more. You know?
And having these kind of your own self-designed artifacts around in your own home, what's the relationship you find between yourself and then when you look at these own creative pieces that you've done?
It's like it's an extension of yourself, isn't it? Of certain aspects in yourself which you project outside into your environment. So it reflects things back to you. Sometimes you create artworks which you then have moved on. So you then don't always want to have everything there for years and years. So you keep changing things.
Okay.
But because, you know, you go through different stages in your life, so it needs then a fresh look in your environment.
That's interesting, because being an artist, I suppose, change is part of the path, and therefore change in the environment is quite natural for you.
Yeah.
And can you just say a little bit about what your understanding of the I Ching is? Because I have had a couple of people email me asking me a little bit more about the I Ching, but if you've already looked at it and in relation to your art, what exactly does that mean for you?
Well, the I Ching is something I was introduced to in the 70s as an oracle book, a book where you can ask, a method of using coins and throwing the coins to get the certain lines which they called hexagrams, broken and closed lines, and you could ask questions, and then there are 64 hexagrams, and these 64 hexagrams are basically 64 stages of movement of the yin and yang sign. Yeah, the yin and yang, the black becomes white, and it's the changing of, well, basically the changing of everything.
Yeah.
Is in this system, in the Chinese system, being portrayed in 64 stages.
Right, that's fascinating, and it once again, it's just saying that nothing is ever still, that creation is constantly shifting and moving and going towards. It's very cyclical in nature. Everything, all this Chinese philosophy is very cyclical, as opposed to the Western way of thinking. It can be quite latitudinal, quite linear. Let's move on to some of these pieces, which I think these are. This one in the centre here is to do with the metal, is it not?
Yeah, the one in the centre, that is a work in progress. That are samples of the current project I'm doing on alchemy, because I'm making this box book. It looks like a book, but when you open it, it's actually a storage box which I'm making into an alchemical curiosity cabinet. Okay. And the outside of it will be woven metal strips embossed with all the alchemical symbols, and then heated. So that the middle bit is just an sample of what I'm currently doing.
Okay, and I've just been teaching about the 5 elements, the earth, wood, fire, and metal. So now that you're working with metal, I tried to kind of convey to people that there's the yin of metal and there's the yang of metal. And given that you work so closely with that element, what would you have to say on that?
It's interesting, because especially with this is copper, and copper is quite soft, so you could say it's yin, and it is it's red, and copper is ruled by the sign of Venus, or the planet Venus rules copper, and Venus is of course a feminine sign, so a yin planet, and yin symbol. The hardness, you would say, it's quite sharp. When you cut it, you have to really watch out that you don't cut your finger. So I would call that quite young. Yeah. With the heating up, you see the different, colors, which you can also say that there is a yin and yang in the colors, a yin side and a yang side.
Yeah, yeah, and working with it physically, has it been a journey in terms of how sometimes metal can be quite sharp and resistant, like the mind? Because I know it's associated with the thinking processes in the Chinese philosophy, and yet there's other times when it's exposed to heat, it kind of yields and is quite malleable.
Exactly, yeah, that's exactly right.
I've just been speaking to someone about metal, and they were saying that a person who is very much in their head is a metal person, and if you gave them the piece of wood, it would soon be sawdust. And it took me a while to realise what that meant, and basically that's someone with a very sharp mind. So for example, to be a lawyer, I suppose you have to have a very sharp mind to see arguments and strategies, that with the element of wood it would be totally cut into tiny little pieces, and that's what the perception of a metal mind would see, is cutting up ideas very fast, and it's just a metaphor for the actual qualities that metal element does have. And what about the other 2 pieces, Katrina?
The piece on in the top corner, that's a wooden 6-sided box with a hat on it. The boxes, there's 6 triangular boxes with the human figures, and they present also alchemy. They are all in different metal colors, and the middle is colored.
Mm.
So they present different stages, different alchemical stages of the human being realizing more its spiritual nature.
Oh, could you say
Uh,
something more about those stages? What are those? What are those stages?
well, the stages for me, they're very much defined by the practice of meditation
Hmm.
and the realizations you make through that meditation process over several years.
Yeah.
And it comes from realizing that you're not your physical body, nor your emotions, nor your mind. You have those things as tools to work with, but that's not what you really are. What you really are, that's you can find out through this process of meditation,
Right.
which then works, upon you, and you start getting insights and expansion of consciousness, which are, you could say metaphorically, it's like an alchemical process.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, that's fascinating. That. Um. And and what about the other picture?
The other picture is are some nasturtiums, and this was in a course I was doing, and we had to draw we had to draw some still life flowers, and my flowers, they didn't. I This was a course I was doing well far away from where I'm living, so I had to take the flowers home and to carry on at home with the drawing, and then the flowers died. And but I keep giving it water, and you see that the shriveled leaves presents, the how it really looked, when they're dying.
Hmm.
But then the buds came, and new flowers came out, and it became very symbolic. The two flowers are my husband and I, who are flourishing and flowering through the meditation process, and the dead leaves became a representation of the past and leaving behind. And there are some new buds, which is the inspiration of other people, which we inspired to do this meditation.
Oh, okay, that sounds fun. So it's almost like you're like a snail. You're leaving behind the illusion of the house that you believe you are to discover something bigger and greater in yourself.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
that's right.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's fascinating.
yeah.
And is this also part of the alchemical
The,
nature?
Yeah, this is part of this project, the Alchemical Curiosity Cabinet, and this is an emblem which I found on the internet. The old alchemists, they would tear sometimes pages out of the illuminated manuscripts, which had this highly symbolic pictures in there with symbols, and they would put that, tear that, put that on their wall in their study or in their lab, and they would study that.
Mm,
And this is a table with all different alchemical symbols, and yeah, this would inspire them. The sun
yeah,
represents gold. Yeah, that's the metal gold,
yeah,
and the moon is the metal silver,
right.
and them coming together. Yeah, that's the highest good what you could get. This is, of course, quite symbolic way of explaining things.
Yeah, yeah, and you've got all the elements there, haven't you? The wood element, the fire. I don't know.
Yeah, you see there in the left down corner is the
Hmm.
phoenix rising up out of his ashes.
Here, yes,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So I suppose is that symbolic of the transmutation or transformation?
that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And so this whole kind of transformation of within yourself, I'm trying to put it across to people that what's on the outside of your environment is reflecting back to you something on the inside. But
Yeah,
likewise, there's a relationship going on. What's within you can also be expressed on the outside. So,
exactly.
like, you're just talking about the gold and the silver elements, symbols, but these are also alchemical symbols, aren't they, to actually represent the spiritual nature of a journey. Yeah.
And you could say that the gold and the silver is also the yin and the yang. Yeah, the gold being yang and the silver being yin. You know, the two elements, you know, which exist in everything, you know, in every human being and everything there is. There are those two dual nature.
Yeah, the duality of the moon is for emotions as well, is that right?
Yeah.
And the gold is represents, is that more the ego or?
Yes,
Yeah. And this piece of work was
this is a tiny little book, and this is part of the alchemical curiosity cabinet. It's in that cabinet there are little bottles and there are little books which I'm making, and the outside got all this woven and stitched metal work on it, but the inside got all little glasses and little pots and little books, and this book is part of it, and this is all stitched. All the pages have different alchemical symbols in it. I see.
So in some ways it's an old age representation of how people perceived alchemy, but you yourself have, from the sounds of it, you've gone through an alchemical process truly within yourself to make the realization that you've just been talking about, that, you know, you are not what you think you are, and that is an illusion, and that actually there is something far greater for everybody to realize. I found that really fascinating. And just to comment on the power of color in the environment, why did you put these on the wall?
This was something which I really wanted to do for a long time. I did a study of a book called The Labors of Hercules, an alchemical interpretation by Alice Bailey. And I gave several talks about that book when I studied it. So it goes through the 12 labors of Hercules, but it gives it all an astrological interpretation. So one day, it was quite a mental orientated book. But because I study astrology, I was quite inspired by it. But I thought one day I'm going to make some visual interpretation of that study of that book.
Right.
So I decided to make those. It's all silk fibers paper I made, and they're all presented. So there are 12 signs of the zodiac, or the 12 signs of the labors of Hercules. But it's a very abstract interpretation of it.
Okay.
So left at the top is Aries. So the top is the Aries, and then Taurus, Gemini, the yellow, which looks a bit like Holland, if you see that, the yellow one. That is Cancer, because Cancer rules the homeland. Yeah. And then the brighter yellow is Leo, and then the green is Virgo, and then it goes back to the bottom row on the left, which is Libra, and then Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces.
Now, so what colour is Pisces, so we all know what we're looking at?
That's the bottom. It's an more like a reddish purple.
Oh, okay, all right. So we're looking at this one as the Pisces.
Yeah, that's Pisces. Right. So they all present basically in short, on another level, they present a spiritual journey.
Okay, so, and how does that, you know, when you're in and around your home, how does that impact upon you when you see it?
I put them out. They have been in various exhibitions, and then I had an open studio at home where, you know, lots of people from the public come and visit your studio and look at it. So I put them up for that purpose. And then my husband and my family, they loved it so much that they wanted me to keep it up there. And it does cover almost the whole wall.
Yeah.
but it's quite a powerful because it's so colorful. It's
Sure.
basically all the rainbow colors
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
there, and it keeps reminding me also about my love of textiles as well as my love of walking this spiritual journey. And it's a reflection of what is happening on the inside.
Yeah.
And as you see, the background wall, our house is very much, orange and yellow
Yeah.
walls. So it's
Yeah.
for some people it might be a bit overpowering, but
But you don't design your place for some people. You design it for who you are, don't you? Anyway.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
And
fascinating.
orange, the orange background, orange is very much a color of being in the now.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so that's why, we got, and the opposite wall of this, which you can't see now, is a yellow wall, which is, gives an quite an uplifting and sunny feel to the room.
Right.
But
Well,
yeah, we
it's
get lots of comments when people come in the room and they see all those, the colorful panels. People keep looking at it,
yes.
so
Well, because I think that so many people work in institutional environments where the colour predominantly is metal, is a magnolia colour,
yeah,
that when they see colour right in front of them, it really does almost hypnotise
yeah,
their view and their sight. And when I'm teaching about the five elements, I mean, you've got all the five elements in there with the blue for water, the black blue for water, the
yeah,
orange for earth, the yellow for earth. You've got the green for the wood, the red for the fire,
yeah,
and you've got the metal, which is white, which you can actually is surrounding the colours themselves. So it's a great depiction of the five elements,
yeah.
and how you express them in your environment is really important. But a lot of people don't even have any colour in their environment at all.
I know.
Um, so there is almost like a starvation there of all the other elements that people need, whether it's an earth colour to ground them, or
Yeah,
a watercolour to be emotional, or a wood colour to actually grow them, or a red colour to be passionate about something or act on something.
yeah,
So most of the time people are surrounded by this constant magnolia colour, and there's nothing wrong with magnolia if it's actually complemented with colours. But
yeah.
when you've got that all the time, then there's very little going on in terms of relationship between you and other aspects in your own chakra system, I believe.
Mm.
So that looks fascinating, and I love the textures of the metal. That's a really, you want to actually go and touch that sign where it says alchemy.
Yeah.
That's the effect it has, certainly upon me. But before we finish, is there anything else that you would like to relay in this particular show, to encourage people to be aware of their own art and how that is important in relationship to yourself?
Yeah, I think for me, and I would really encourage people to look for any way of being more creative and create an environment which is an extension of yourself, because the environment can be have such a great impact upon you. So you put healing energy there. Colors, for example, can bring about certain aspects in yourself. So yeah, anything creative, also what you've made yourself, will I think will bring out in you some more elements of what you are as a human being, by creating
Yeah,
something.
yeah. Well, I think that's a great message to leave on, really, is the least you can actually do is bring some colour in. And, if you want, to, as you say, if people need healing, or if they need support, or if they need various aspects that are lacking in their life, then to bring in a colour or a texture to
Yeah,
actually denote that, which reminds people, sometimes people can't actually physically give that to themselves, but when
yeah,
it's actually out facing them on the environment, then that is a reflection back to them, and that's really sums up the power of the feng shui concept as well, that everything around you is you.
Yeah.
And it sounds to me like that in your alchemical journey in the meditation, you have also discovered that everything is you, and that's a great message to end on. But before we do, can you just if people want to see any more of your work, or where would they look, or who would they go to?
Well, if they Google my name, they will undoubtedly come across things. But I also I have a blog and a Pinterest account.
Okay.
I can give you my blog, and maybe you can post it there, or it's normally on the bottom of my emails.
Okay. Well, how about if I give out my email, wealthyspaces@gmail.com, for any interest, and I can pass it on to you.
Okay.
How does that sound?
Yeah, that sounds perfect.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Katrina. It's been a delight to speak about your work and also your own personal journey. It's something that you don't hear too much about, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Katie, for inviting me and for talking to me.
Okay. Thank you.